Hey everybody, Flip Robinson here, one of the co-founders of the Freedom Real Estate Group family of companies. And I'd like to welcome you to our podcast. And our podcast is Real Talk, which is Real Talk for the real estate investors. And today's podcast is number
25.
That's where Caitlin fills in the number right there. Anyway, because I don't remember what number this is. Anyway, but today's podcast is titled From Consultant to President. And I'd like to welcome to our podcast today our president of the Freedom Real Estate Group family companies, Mr. Aaron Davis.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes. And so before we get, because I've got some juicy questions here.
Nice.
Not really. Anyway, so gosh, it's we're now in end of September.
Yeah.
And so how long have you been here now?
I guess I'm 4 months in. Started in May. June, July. Yeah.
4 months in from consultant to president. This is not the normal standard, going from consultant, like mailroom to CEO, right?
Sure. Yeah, it was not wasn't chasing a title or a role coming in as a consultant. I thought it was a temporary gig, but it worked out, and I'm glad it did.
Well,
Happy to be here.
Yeah. That's awesome. We're ecstatic that you're here.
Likewise.
I can say that. That's just me. I'm not talking about anyone else. So I have some questions here, and so we're going to dig into this. How would you define your leadership style?
Yeah, so I'm an enabling, activating kind of leader, right? So I'm not by default. I don't grab the work and take it and do it myself. I tend to think about who's engaged in it every day, every minute, and optimizing how they're able to get their work done. So a lot of times that comes in the form of providing them more inside information. Sometimes that comes in the form of changing authorities and, who's allowed to approve what and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's about aligning incentives and goals, right? So I guess you would call that I'm a macro manager, right? I like to plug people into the big picture and then kind of let them run.
Right.
And it's really, kind of like the default. It's really easy to kind of fall into the opposite, path where you kind of make decisions and whatever else. As a leader, you tend to, maybe you've been around more, or you have a little more confidence because you've earned some scars, that kind of thing. So it's really easy to just instinctively make a call. As opposed to what do you think, right? The enabling kind of behavior, right?
Right.
So anyway, so that's kind of my style. I mean, that's how I like to roll. I like to think very much about kind of building the capacity in somebody to be able to execute the work and make the decisions themselves, as opposed to, kind of building a reliability on me, right? Or a dependence on me, rather.
Right.
I guess a reliability on me is good. A dependence is not great.
Right. And I have not had very much interaction with you on the business side of things.
Sure.
I mean, we always talk, but I've seen the differences, and it's great to watch, and it's like I'm just sitting over here with a box of popcorn, just watching watching you do your thing, and it's, I love it. It's great.
There is some method back there.
Yeah, there is. So how do you go? How do you approach your work?
Yeah. So. I come out of the software world. I've worked in that space a lot, and it's really, there's a tendency for engineers and people who build stuff to just start building and kind of skip the design phase, right? So I use that kind of framework when I think about leadership. The design phase in my mind is understanding the objectives, not just we want to make this many $1 million, or we want to have this many properties turned or whatever, right? But the objectives, like the controls and the variables that you want to go along with those things too, and a little bit deeper understanding of exactly what you're trying to build, right? So for me, that's the starting point, right? A good design document or a good understanding of how the product's going to work, that kind of thing, right? So I start with understanding a picture of you as a founder, and Danny as a founder, and the rest of the leadership team. Like, what do we want this to look like in 2 years? And then, from there, kind of backward plan to these are the outputs we're going to need to produce in order to get there, right? So I think that's a small body of work in and of itself. I start with that, and then once you kind of have things that you're trying to do, then you can start to discern how you measure the effectiveness of producing those things, right?
Right.
So, if one of your goals is something gray and ambiguous, like we want our employees to love working here. Well, you got to figure out how to measure something like that.
Right. Right.
So that can be tricky sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. It's just, a certain number of whatever. You're counting widgets or whatever. Sometimes it gets kind of fuzzy. So.
Yeah, well, and it's because I know, most everybody that's listening, they've been following us or whatever, and they follow Danny and I, and most everything we've done is we've just done it.
Sure.
We need more money, so let's get more properties.
That's right.
And it was oversimplified.
One of the problems you run into as a founder, and I've done this myself, and I've worked with founders before, so it's a common thing, is that there's so much instinct and backstory and depth that you bring as you build a team. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to manage a team, when it's 10, 15, 20 people, and you can kind of be in all the stuff, it's really easy to to lose how many variables go into your ability to make those calls, right? And then when you get to the stage where you want to scale and grow and then focus on other things like multifamily properties and whatever else, right? And you have to hand over leadership of your operation to management. Mm-hmm. Well, then there's just a lot of fuzzy stuff in there to figure out. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that the other day. One of our rare occasions where we did talk business, we were talking about incentives and the way people are motivated and that kind of thing. And I mean, there's nobody better incentivized than the founders. Like, you have all the controls and variables that matter are part of your decision making. You know what I mean?
Right.
And picking all those little things out is tricky.
Yep.
So it's an ongoing thing. That kind of like assessing what matters, figuring out what to measure is an ongoing thing. But you guys are doing great. I think it's harder for most founders to have as much trust and to be as bold about making as many moves as so you guys have done, in my observation, a really good job of knowing that you're going to have to take some risks and let people make calls. Mm-hmm. And I think it's part of why we're making things happen well. So but that's a tricky business.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, just in the case of two things that I wanted to point out was, number one, we had our BAM board meeting this morning. Yeah. And so you creating that, and for everyone, because the acquisition guys, all they're doing is they're just buying.
Right.
That's their gig. They're just keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. And they don't know the whole process, from when they're picking up the phone to what happens all the way at the very end.
Sure.
And the same thing with property management. They're at the end. Mm-hmm. They don't understand all this stuff. And it's not because they should know. That's not their gig. Their gig is property management, and the acquisition guys, I don't want them to do anything besides buy.
Right.
But once they get the whole picture and see that, and so when you created the BAM board, that was just one of the things that I just went, this is awesome. I would have never thought of that in a million years.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to point out, and you can comment on both of these, is and I think you just did a podcast, I think with Tiffany, with the Ivan the Investor.
Yeah, we're going to do another one on that.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good. Because
week ahead or something.
I remember walking into the training room and just this timeline going across the wall, and I was just like, that's brilliant. Yeah. Because again, we don't think that way, and you're coming in and you're just dissecting everything, and so if you want to,
what occurs to me is the balance between really zeroing in and focusing on a lane, and then stepping back and looking at the big picture. It's not a balance, but it's really an ebb and flow. You kind of go back and forth that as you grow as a business, you kind of have to, at some point, you and Danny are buying a property, overseeing this renovation, selling a property, and you're doing all the things. Mm-hmm. At some point way back when, and then you decide, okay, well, I'm going to have somebody do this section.
Right.
And so you train them, and you're like, well, this is how we do that. That's how we do this. And then you're focused on the other things. And then you get and we've hired a bunch of leaders.
That's exactly what's happened. Yeah,
so we pieced off all these things and said, hey, you kind of manage this tower, you manage this tower, you manage this tower, and then throw it from that tower to that tower. And then so now we're in this phase where, okay, well, let's back up a little bit and let's kind of reorient all of these lanes into the big picture, right? And so they get the race. We've used that relay race analogy. We're beating that one up. It's a great analogy for what we do. We buy, we rehab, we sell, then we manage, right? Properties. Yep. And so we have these handoffs, and it's just this. We each run our quadrants or whatever. But we're in this phase where we've got to get this racer who knows this particular leg of the race really well to understand the big picture of the whole lap, right? Of the whole race. And so we're backing up a little bit, doing some of these big picture things. And then that'll enable these handoffs to happen a little bit smarter. People will make better judgments about a buy when they're vested in some way in the sale and management of the property, and vice versa, right? So, and we'll go through another phase again when we get everybody kind of caught up on big picture, where we then got to drill down a little bit,
right,
and get people a little bit more depth and expertise in their particular space, and you kind of go through that cycle.
Yeah,
right?
I like how you said ebb and flow. Yeah, that's perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
So you talked about a little bit, being in the tech industry. So what's your background?
Yeah, so a bunch of stuff. I served in the Army for a while. I did some sales, financial services industry stuff for a while, in like securities and as a broker, insurance stuff. And then I got into the tech world via recruiting. So I was really like a headhunter or whatever was kind of my expertise. So I got into HR through that. Kind of came back into tech and leadership in the consulting space, and so a little bit of a hodgepodge of like personnel, tech, and then sales. So that's kind of the bag that I'm bringing to this business. The real estate has always kind of been a side hustle for me too, right? So now I've had these kind of professional experiences, marrying them up then with my love for the what was the side hustle, and that was a career. Right?
Well, and I love this because I didn't even know about the Army. So thank you for your service. That's awesome. I didn't even know that.
Sure, they paid for my college loans. So.
Well, there you go.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for paying your taxes.
Yeah, thank you, Army. But because Freedom Real Estate Group. Actually, we were on a podcast last week, and the guy said, "You're veterans, right?" And we're like, "No, we just love veterans." So,
take all the affection I can get.
That's right. Well, and you sort of alluded to this too. It just there you got ahead of me. But so like, what real estate? What have you done before? Prior to coming to walking in the door of Fregland here.
Yeah. So a couple things. I bought and sold my own homes, of course, and so you learn a little bit. And I learned to be a handyman in my 20s or whatever because I couldn't afford to hire contractors, right?
Right. Do it yourself.
That's exactly right. So that was a little bit of a first step. As I put a little money aside and was able to, I got into buying rental properties, and so I've been a landlord myself. And I've also done several flips, and so I've bought properties with the express intent of flipping them, renovated them, and sold them. So I had my hand in a couple of different lanes in the real estate business. I've always enjoyed it as a secondary thing, and mostly managing it closely myself, right? So like I've been hands-on with some of the stuff. I've actually managed the rental properties myself, and so a little bit more hands-on. And I wish I knew you guys sooner. I probably would have let you manage my property. I would have kept a couple of rentals that I ended up selling. So anyway, but so that's my experience there in the real estate business.
Well, that's awesome. And this isn't on one of my questions on here. So, but have you always been from around this area, Southwest Ohio?
No, I grew up in San Diego.
Oh.
So born and raised in San Diego. Lived there until I graduated high school, and then I moved to the Midwest to go to school. Ended up getting married, kids, the whole business here, and those kids dig roots.
I was going to say, usually people from Ohio move to San Diego.
I know, right?
You did it the wrong way.
I love it here, though. Like you can buy a little mansion for an affordable price. And it took me a decade to learn to appreciate the seasons.
Yeah.
For too many years, fall was just like a long, sad introduction to the winter.
Yeah, right.
But now I've learned to love the fall, and having a big garage attached to your house helps with the winters.
I tell you, if no one appreciates the four seasons here in Ohio, move to Phoenix for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then move back. You'll appreciate everything about Ohio. Let me tell you.
I was spoiled on that San Diego climate, though. But I have learned to love it here now. It's home, and I don't think I'm going anywhere.
Yeah, we actually love it too. This is I'm going into year 6 of living in Ohio without owning a snow shovel. So
what?
Let's hope that works still. Still don't have one.
Wow.
So how did you get to this point? So from consultant to president, you kind of alluded to a lot of things, but how did you get to this point?
Yeah, so when I joined FREG, our renovations chief I'm connected to. I know him well, right? We've got a family connection, and so he sat me down and he said, "Hey," he kind of knows what I do, as an operations leader and that kind of thing, and he said, "Hey, we need help in our property management space." And I don't, anybody who's followed us knows that, we made an acquisition there. We built a team. That's a really difficult business. And it was difficult for us too, right? And so we were, not doing an exceptional job for all of our customers. There was just stuff that we weren't doing as well as we could. And you guys were in a position to find the help that you needed. Our renovations chief brought me in and said, "Hey man, they need your help. Can you come do this?" I was open to it. I was running my startup and doing some side work and consulting and whatever else, so it fit. I wasn't ready to commit to anything long term or full time. In fact, I think I had pitched the idea to Danny that maybe I'll just help fractionally, a little bit here and there. And she talked me into giving a full week to it. And so I jumped in with you all in May and worked with Chris, our property manager, to kind of make some big changes there to some of the things that we were doing with the kind of a laser focus on creating a great experience for our owners. Right. And so we've made big strides there, and kudos to Chris for a lot of leadership that he's displayed. And I helped with some things. Some of it was bandwidth, some of it was depth that I brought out of other industries and perspective. And I think that was a really effective first couple of months in that engagement, and built some trust and some partnerships that really worked. And you know what, Flip, I'm so glad that I started in that space. It was a realization that I had in the middle of it that is our product. That's what we sell, right? Like we buy good properties, we renovate good properties, but so do a lot of folks, right? What a big chunk of what we sell is the fact that we're also doing property management in-house. So we can tell you what to expect. We can collaborate with people at all parts of the process. It was also one of the gaps we identified is that our customers didn't know that. It was a little unclear that we really kind of owned every part of the process, right? So anyway, being part of like that core product was really cool, and then figuring out where things were being handed off when they should have been a softer, warmer, slower handoff and that kind of thing, right? And then next thing you know, all those tentacles kind of got me into other parts of the business, and and I couldn't keep my nose out of certain things, and here we go, right? And here we are. So
we just eased you in.
Yeah. I tend to do that. Back when I was working in a kitchen in college, I'm like, well, hey, I can help with the grill, and I'm supposed to be working the fryer, and next thing you know, I'm flipping the burgers and whatever, and then you're running the kitchen. So, got a habit of doing these things.
Well, I remember because I didn't know the background story. That Steve, he's our renovations chief
and our hell of a recruiter too.
And so I remember, I believe he had told Danny, that she needs to talk to you. And then I believe Danny told Randy, hey, I'm going to talk to Aaron Davis.
Sure.
And I believe the quote of what Randy said when he heard that was, whoa. Nothing else, just whoa. And then we're like, and that's when it got serious. And we're like, okay, we need to get this guy in. So it's been, and I love watching it too, because, like I said before, like what you've done with the team, and I've seen differences in individual people that have been. There's no other reason why that changed for those people. It have been other than because of you. And so I love watching. I love how people are thinking about things now, because they're thinking differently. Because, like I said, you said it, Danny and I, we bought houses, we renovated them, and we sold them, and we put property management in place and move on next. And now we've got this team. I think we're over 50 people now, and it's overwhelming.
I'm a big believer in the collective intelligence of a group. And it's really easy when you start drawing up lanes for people to operate in a business. I think most of us do this most of the time when we're leading people, is that either because of visibility or because of I'm not sure if I should or I'm supposed to, whatever, we kind of cap and limit people's ability to influence other things that they would be good at, right? So if there's anything, I appreciate you noticing that, because that's, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that is kind of my style of leadership. I'm not necessarily inclined to be the fastest, smartest, biggest guy in the room. It's more about, how do I kind of connect people that should be connected, and influence and engage people that should be influenced and engaged in certain things or whatever, that empower them to do it. There's a lot of really smart folks in this. When you have that many people, it's a stressor and it's an asset, because it's a stressor because people don't show up for free.
Right.
So every time you add new brain power and add new labor to your organization, you have a burden now to take care of them and so on. So that's cool. But it's also a great asset if you can get all that they want to give, right? And most people, in my experience, most people want to give more than we even ask of them, right?
Right.
People like solving problems. They like impressing their colleagues and doing cool stuff, right? So I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit of an artist at leveraging that energy,
Right.
So
now, before I get to this last question, I've got a question that's not on here, so this is going to come at you from the side here. So COVID hit. A lot of people started working remotely. Well, we had people working remotely for us way before it was cool.
Sure.
And so we've got, like I said, we're over 50 people now. A majority of them are in the Philippines. But then we also have a few here in the States that are working remotely.
Yep.
So what is, because this is a team, what's your biggest challenge with that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge is trying to optimize for both, right? Like a fully remote team is almost easier than a half remote team, right? Because you just accept and concede on all those things that you can't have, right? Like we can't do a luncheon together or whatever if we're remote.
Hey, we try.
I know. So you just do it some other way. If you're 100% remote, you do other things to engage and connect and make friends and that kind of thing, right? Share ideas and get into deeper conversations. It's the hybrid thing that's difficult, but we're right there with the rest of the world.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Unraveling that problem and trying to get great at it. I think we're good at it already. There's a lot of room for us to get better, and the whole world's trying to get better at it. Right.
Because it's not going away.
No, it's not going away. It's not going away ever. I mean, we do have the benefit of a lot of our product and such is localized, right? So we can, kind of disproportionately focus on local folks or whatever. It makes sense. We have some field folks or whatever that have to be local, obviously.
Right.
So we're always going to have local folks. We also have, we're good at finding talent all over the world.
Yep.
Right. And here we are, a team from all over the world. So we're taking the best of both. But the tricky part is, do you have a meeting with 12 people that could be done remotely? Do you have the 6 local folks in the room and the 6, right? So the answer is both. Like I've got one kind of core meeting that we're doing that I would love as many people as possible in the room, and the other one I'm saying, you know what, we'll just do that whole meeting remote.
Yep.
And so it's always kind of a judgment call, and it's it's a huge asset being local, right? Like we get to sit in the same room together and record this meeting. I get to wander by your office and say, hey, you ready?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? and having 2 or 3 conversations on the way that are productive. I mean, there's value in all that stuff.
There's the water cooler.
Yeah.
Hey, what'd you do last night?
Yeah, exactly. But this office isn't free.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
it's a tricky one, but I think we're doing a good job of grabbing the best of both worlds, and obviously I think we can get great with the rest of the world as we learn all these tools and tricks, and there's a ton of resources out there. So it's not intimidating to me, but it's just one more little thing we have to figure out how to do great.
Yep. So what opportunities do you see for taking FREG, Freedom Real Estate Group, to the next level?
Yeah.
I don't even know what the next level is, but it just, I don't even know, but.
Yeah. So, the next level is layers of leadership, right? That's where it gets tricky. Once you get 100 people or whatever else, you've got leaders leading leaders and that kind of thing. And then you really have to get, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about founders handing off this kind of instinctive decision making in the work, in the middle of the weeds decision making to managers. And then as you get bigger, then you have to have people handing that off to other people who are then handing it off to other people and so on. So there becomes layers. So the need to be super clear and decisive as early as possible about where you want to go and the tactics you're going to use to get there is important. And then your ability to influence the culture in terms of work habits and values and stuff of a workforce gets more indirect. Right. So you have to think very intentionally about what kind of like you do the remote thing. Okay, well, we're going to start doing this stuff or whatever. What does that do to to the relationships and whatever? So anyway, you have to get a little bit more intentional earlier and faster about the things you want to influence, because some of the things we're going to do now aren't going to be decisions we make this week that we see impact this week. They're going to be decisions we make today that take 3 months then to impact the way that the team works.
Right.
So some of the opportunity I see, so all that's kind of the framework for my answer. The opportunity I see to take us to the next level is intentionally just kind of like getting a bigger picture view across the whole team, right? So that they kind of understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish from the time we do an acquisition to the time we, put a tenant back in a property that's been vacated, right?
Right.
All the whole life cycle, so that we can lean on each other a little bit more, right? So we have a more versatile staff, more of the answers more often, can answer, first time the question's asked kind of thing, as opposed to, you got to ask Joe or you got to ask Mary, right?
Right.
So I think that's a big opportunity, and you kind of alluded to things we're doing in that direction. Another thing is like certain cultural habits about, decision makings and risk and that kind of thing. And that's hairy, because it's not like when you get bigger, you can now afford to mess up a lot. People think, you got more money and you have bigger budget or whatever else, so you can just blow it. No, you can't. Because you also have bigger staff and bigger responsibilities.
Exactly.
And, the same amount of customers that expect certain results and that kind of thing, right? So you can't afford to be careless with it. But for people to be innovative and for a team to solve problems and to do the work on the ground at the right time, which is as fast as possible, you have to plan for, or even budget for, a certain amount of risk taking, right? And so that's a cultural opportunity, I think, that as you get bigger, you just kind of have to intentionally manage for. Right. So that's where we're at.
Try to be one step ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, I love this. This is great, because I'm like, okay, great. I get to interview Aaron, but I've learned, there's things about you I didn't know. I just peel it apart.
Sergeant Davis. That's right.
Well, awesome. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. Again, it's Real Talk, which is Real Talk for the real estate investor. And again, thank you, Aaron, our president, for joining us for today's podcast. But we always like to end our podcast with
invest smart,
live happy. Bye, everybody. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on this show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.